Hey everybody, it's Lynn Hayes here. Welcome back to another video. And if you're new here, a special welcome to you as well, especially to my Facebook friends who joined me this week. There was a big group of them that all signed up. So I really appreciate your being here and look forward to sharing more videos with you. We're living in very interesting times right now, and just to recap a little bit, last year we had a lot of compression and restriction under a big influence in Capricorn. This year we are moving into Aquarius and also a square from Saturn to Uranus. Saturn, the planet of restriction, Uranus being the planet of radical change, radical revolution, and Jupiter, the planet of freedom, is also tied in there. It's not surprising then that there's a fair amount of civil unrest in the world, and that's a bit of a theme for 2021. If you were thinking that 2021 would magically erase all the situations of 2020, you would sadly be mistaken. 2021 is already bringing a new set of challenges. Here in the United States, we have an inauguration this week, and it comes on the heels of a pretty traumatic event in the Capitol last week. The planetary aspects this week are somewhat challenging as we look forward into the inauguration period. We have a square, a challenging alignment between Jupiter and Uranus. These are the two liberation planets. Jupiter is a personal planet. It shows where we find meaning in life, where we want to be bigger than we are, where we want abundance and opportunities. And then Uranus is a transpersonal planet. It's an inspirational force. It inspires us to be our own person, to break out of the shackles that are holding us back. So both of these planets have a lot to do with growth and change. When the two are in a challenging square to each other, that growth and change can be more drastic and it can be more difficult. When we have the hard angle aspects, we tend to experience those alignments with more difficulty. So there could be some challenge, and it's not going to help that our friend Mars, who was with us for most of last year, has now moved into Taurus. It's not as fiery as it was when it was in Aries for most of last year, but it still is very strong. It can be very stubborn in Taurus. Mars in Taurus has a long fuse, but once that fuse is lit, there can be a big explosion. All of these planets are in fixed signs. Aquarius is a fixed sign. Taurus is a fixed sign. And this week we have Mars in Taurus aligning with Uranus in Taurus in a square to Jupiter. This can lead to a certain amount of disruption. How much disruption? I'm not going to try to predict, but I think it's a good idea to be prepared for a bit of upheaval during the week. Now, as we go through the day-by-day analysis, you'll see that there will be some periods that are more gentle and more soothing, and where it will be easier to find a place of stability and to center and ground ourselves. But overall, the energy is fairly intense. Anytime we have a big influence of Uranus, it can be difficult to sleep. And when we have Mars interacting with Uranus, as we have over this whole week, it can become even more difficult. So just watch for that as the week goes by. This inclusion of Mars in with this cocktail of planets, Saturn, Uranus, and Jupiter, will really be in effect until around the 26th of January, because of what we call the orb of influence. The chart for the inauguration is definitely challenging. I know a lot of astrologers look at the chart of the inauguration as being a predictor of what the presidency is going to be like. And I'm not so sure that we've seen this, but I'm going to go through the exercise anyway and tell you a few things. It's definitely a challenging chart. There's no doubt about it. The chart is set for January 20th, 2021, of course, and I set it for around 11 o'clock, but we don't really know what time the actual oath of office will be administered. So I'm not even looking at the ascendant or the descendant or the midheaven or any of those angles. In the chart, the sun, which represents the essence of the presidency, I guess we would say, or the essence of the inauguration chart, the sun is newly in Aquarius, which means there are 4 planets in Aquarius. And Aquarius really speaks to the ideals of the country, humanitarianism, justice, equality. These are all the professed ideals that we hold in the United States. I say professed because obviously in the last few years we've seen a whole different side that has been hidden for a long time. And we are heading into the U.S. Pluto return. Pluto has been activating the U.S. chart really since 2000, when Pluto crossed the ascendant of the chart. Over the last couple of years, we've had Saturn in the sky transiting the U.S. Pluto, and we're getting very close to a transit of Pluto in the sky to the U.S. Pluto, which we're calling the Pluto return. This is likely going to be a pretty intense time, and the Pluto return won't actually occur until 2022 to 2024. So we're really just in the beginnings of this, and I really think it's a good idea for us to pace ourselves. We have to pace our outrage. We can't let ourselves be burned up in the fire of rage at what is happening right now. We have to settle into ourselves a little more deeply with a little more perspective and a little more wisdom, and see where we are able to have an effect and where we can't have an effect. One very interesting thing that I noticed about the inauguration chart is that Mars, which is conjunct Uranus right then, is exactly square the nodes of the US chart. So the nodes of the moon represent the direction of our fate from the past to the future. And here we have Mars, the planet of fire and action and desire, conjunct Uranus, the planet of change, in a challenging aspect to the nodes of destiny. There definitely seems to be a turning point here, a choice, something that is going to change radically so that we are, as a nation, able to move more fully in the direction of the future of the country. This sounds difficult, and it very well could be. But the outcome is a more authentic future, and that's really what we're always looking for. Also in the inauguration chart, we have Pluto opposite Mercury in the US chart. So there's definitely a sense of ideological battles. Mercury has to do with our thoughts and our ideas, the way we communicate, the way we process information. Pluto has actually been opposite the US Mercury for quite some time, and we can see that in this whole idea of fake news and fake information. Conspiracies. Nobody really knows what the truth is. There's secrets everywhere. Pluto is all about digging up the dirt, literally, digging up the soil and digging up the destructive forces that lie underneath. And with Pluto opposite Mercury in the US chart, we can see where this has really been a big drama with all of this, fake news, and there's QAnon, with all of these really interesting and unusual ideas, like that JFK Jr. never died and he was going to replace Mike Pence on the vice presidential ticket, which is all very Plutonic, by the way. But in any case, the U.S. is definitely undergoing a big transition and a very big shift. And so for us, for me personally, what does that mean? This is what I always have to ask myself. What can I control? What can't I control? What can I actually do to help things? I can work on an individual level. I can work with my clients to try to help them to have happier lives. I can work with my family to try to be sure that everybody is safe and taken care of. I can work with my community to try to be supportive and to try to share love and spread the spirit of community in the town that I live in the state that I live in the country, in the world. I feel that it's not going to really help anybody if I spend my life in this desperate anxiety about what's happening in the world right now. So with that in mind, I advise that we try to stay grounded, that we try to stay centered, that we spend some time in nature every day, that we get some sunshine when we can. It's been very difficult here in North Carolina, where it's been 40 degrees and cloudy for weeks. But the sun is out there, and we need to spend as much time in it as we can. One thing that I wanted to talk a little bit about today is that Mercury is going to be turning retrograde on January 30th. And I have a separate little video about Mercury retrograde that I'll link in the description box. But there is a period when the motion of Mercury begins to slow down as it gets closer to Earth, or it appears to slow down, and it becomes more significant and more important. And that's when I feel really the energy starts to change, and we have to really start paying attention to our thoughts, our communications, the agreements that we make. Mercury has already started slowing down, so just know that Mercury will turn retrograde on the 30th, but you might as well start paying attention now. People are always worried, what can I do when Mercury is retrograde? I know a lot of people say not to have surgery when Mercury is retrograde, but surgery, if it's to repair something, is perfectly fine when Mercury is retrograde. I just had cataract surgery when Mercury was retrograde. I didn't worry for a minute, but it might not be the best time to enter into an agreement to buy a car. Often we have to buy a car or a house when Mercury is retrograde. And sometimes we do have issues that come up. Sometimes we have to go back over agreements, remake agreements, renegotiate contracts. And if you have to take a job when Mercury is retrograde, or there's something you have to do, then you have to do it. But just be careful. Make sure that what you're agreeing to is actually what you want. Make sure to read the fine print, especially when Mercury is retrograde, although that's not a bad thing to do anyway, just as a typical practice. So with that in mind, let's talk about the week ahead. On Monday, January 18th, the moon is going to move into Aries very early in the morning Eastern time. Please adjust for your own locality. Having the moon in Aries for a couple of days around this time of the inauguration, when we have Mars and Jupiter and Saturn and Uranus, all these planets are butting heads, then here's the moon in Aries, which is the warrior, the most fiery of the fire sign. When the moon is in Aries, we generally feel more forceful. This is a very important time to try to get some physical activity. With all of this energy kind of swirling around us, we need to try to be as grounded as we can. We need to try to burn off as much excess energy as we can. And the moon is very active on Monday after it goes into Aries. It'll make a harmonious sextile to both Jupiter and Saturn that day. So the Aries moon harmonizing with Saturn helps to be kind of a grounding force. We get the energy of the Aries moon with the grounded practicality of Saturn. And then later in the afternoon, the moon sextiles Jupiter, which helps to give us more of a sense of optimism, more confidence. But sandwiched in the middle is a conjunction of the moon to Chiron. Chiron, the planet of wounding and healing. When the moon is conjunct Chiron, we sometimes are more sensitive emotionally. We can be triggered more easily. So this is generally, a day of good feeling and good energy, but just watch for a little bit of sensitivity, especially in the middle of the day Eastern time, maybe between 11 a.m. and 2 p.m., something like that. Adjust for your own time zone, please. Then on Tuesday morning, we have some minor lunar aspects that I don't think you're even going to notice. There's a square from the moon to Venus and a sextile from the moon to Mercury. I don't really think that this will give you too much trouble. And then at 3:39 p.m., the sun enters Aquarius. I'm not super happy with the light right now. There's a lot of shadows and things, but anyway. After the moon enters Aquarius, there will be 4 planets, including the sun, which isn't really a planet, it's a luminary, but we sort of lump them all together to make it easier and simpler. But in any case, the Aquarius influence is definitely building. So 4 planets in Aquarius, then we have the square from Jupiter to Uranus, Uranus the modern ruler of Aquarius, all having to do with social justice. The willingness to stand up for what you think is right is very Aquarian. Wednesday, of course, we have the inauguration, and the big event that is exact that day is the conjunction of Mars to Uranus. This conjunction will be embedded in the chart for the inauguration. And if it does turn out that the chart for the inauguration is the chart for the presidency, this is going to be the defining planetary configuration. Mars conjunct Uranus in the sign of Taurus. Taurus, the sign of security, of financial wealth, of stability, of peacefulness. And you have Mars, planet of anger and drive and motivation, conjunct Uranus, the planet of radical change. On that day, we have the Aries moon making a square to Pluto very early in the morning, Eastern time. And then the moon moves into Taurus at 1:56 p.m. Over the day on January 20th, the moon is going to interact with Mars and Uranus The Taurus moon will square the Aquarius sun at about 4 p.m. Eastern time, and it will then square Saturn. And then as we roll over to the next day, which is Thursday, January 21st, then the Taurus moon is going to conjunct Mars and Uranus. And this happens very early in the morning Eastern time, around 3:30 to 4 o'clock a.m. And then the moon's going to go on to square Jupiter. But Jupiter and Uranus, remember, are very close to a square, so the moon is pretty much setting off this whole dynamic. This day on the 21st could also be fairly active. The Taurus moon, at least, is seeking some kind of comfort and stability. There's a desire for equanimity, for peacefulness, for some harmony. But because of these planetary interactions, especially involving Mars and Uranus, we could see some disruption. So this is a very good day to try to spend as much time in nature as you possibly can. When the moon is in Taurus, we feel naturally drawn towards nature. Taurus is the sign that I associate with the Earth. I like to think of Taurus as actually being ruled by the planet Earth. The Earth can really nurture and nourish us at this time. So even if you live in a city, if you have a plant, if you can walk through a park, that sort of peacefulness of trees and birds can really help to sustain us at this time. Then on Friday, January 22nd, things start to mellow out. We have the Taurus moon in a sextile to Venus very early in the morning Eastern time. Then it's sextile, which is a harmonious aspect, sextile to Neptune at around 4:30 in the morning Eastern time. And then in a harmonious trine to Pluto in the afternoon around 4:30. The moon is very flowing that day. It's very nurturing. It's very peaceful. It can be very creative. We're lacking that fiery animosity and disruption of the previous few days. It's a good time to sort of reset, restabilize. There is a challenging square from the moon to Mercury at around 9 in the morning, but the other energies are so mellow and smooth, I don't think that's going to be too disruptive. And that takes us to Saturday, January 23rd. The moon moves into Gemini at 2:43 a.m. Eastern time. When the moon is in Gemini, the mind is much more active. There's a great deal of communication, sharing of information. We may be less emotional under that influence because Gemini is really just about information, doesn't judge, doesn't really have feelings about it. There's also a beautiful alignment of Venus in a sextile to Pluto that day. It perfects in the early afternoon Eastern time. But because Venus transits usually last for a day or two, it'll be in effect the whole day and then into the next day for a bit. The Venus sextile to Neptune is very creative. It's very flowy. Venus is in Capricorn, which is more grounded, and then Neptune, of course, is in Pisces, which is very imaginative. There's a great deal of expansion of our imagination. We see the world through a different lens when Venus is sextile Neptune. If you're a creative person at all, it's a wonderful time to plan some sort of creative project. If you don't think you're creative, this is a day to start something, because under this influence, we can all be a little bit more creative. We also, and I'm giving you the positive things first because there's a couple of big challenges. We also have the Gemini moon harmonizing with all of the Aquarius planets. So remember, there's 4 in Aquarius. This is a very good time emotionally because we have the moon harmonizing with the sun, with Saturn for stability, with Neptune for imagination, and with Chiron for emotional healing. Now, the challenging aspects that day are a conjunction from Mars to Jupiter, which perfects at 2:48 a.m. So really this influence, as I was saying earlier, is going to last for much of the week. When Mars is conjunct Jupiter, everybody wants to be right. Everybody wants to be in charge. Even though Mars is in Taurus, where it's not as bombastic as it would have been in Aries, still we have Mars, which is aggressive, which is assertive, square Jupiter, which expands everything that it comes into contact with. So on this day, we have all these beautiful harmonious aspects, and then we have this Mars square Jupiter. So there's a lot of power in this. I kind of feel like the ideal scenario is when we have a big challenging aspect and some beautiful harmonious aspects to help wrap them all up together. And that's what we have on Saturday, January 23rd. Also that day, we have the Sun in Aquarius conjunct Saturn. So that can help to bring some grounding, some balancing. That can help us to more easily integrate all of these disparate energies for the day, which takes us to Sunday, January 24th. This, thank goodness, is a very quiet day as far as the planets go. We do still have the Mars influence. The Mars conjunction with Jupiter is still in effect. The trigger of Mars to Jupiter and Saturn and Uranus will really be in effect until around the 26th. That's when Mars will go out of range of this alignment and things will start to settle down some. After the 23rd, we should find it a little easier to reintegrate. The only real planetary alignment on Sunday, January 24th, is a square from the Gemini moon to Neptune. This is a time when we are likely to be doing some wool gathering, I think they call it, to let our minds wander, to be creative, to be imaginative. It's not a really good day to try to set any kind of boundaries. And that takes us to Monday, January 25th. We'll have a new video that day, but in the meantime, the Sun is in a harmonious sextile to Chiron that day that peaks at around 5:30 in the morning. This is a beautiful day for any kind of healing work, any kind of connection with other people. It's a day when we can access our feelings more easily. It's a day when we can connect more easily to other people's feelings. At 1:51 p.m. on Monday, the moon will move into the sign of Cancer. And for the next couple of days with the moon in Cancer, we will likely be feeling more emotional. It's a time when we're going to want to reach out to the people around us and really feel that connection, the connection to others that nurtures us and that helps us to feel like we're part of a family or a community. So I think that's a good place to end this video. Thanks so much for being here with me. I really appreciate it. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them for me below, and I'll look forward to seeing you next week.